Okay, now we get into reflections. We are here today to honor Al. He has been known by many names over the years, but I think my favorite name has to be Diane. That was his friend Gary's name for him. Upon speaking to Al during the last week with us, I had a chance to get a better idea of what Al wanted when this day finally came. He didn't want us to mourn his leaving us, but to remember the good times. He didn't want us to cry, but laugh at some of the crazy as well as the good things that he did in his time here at Rentham. I do not mean to speak disrespectfully of a person who is no longer with us. The man is there a list of things that people have brought up to me to talk about. Good thing Al can't hear any of this because his friends quickly threw him under the bus. I have roughly 10 stories I'm going to tell. They're not too long, or Al may really pass on before we're done. I'm characterizing these stories into that people that Al could possibly be. He could work for the Postal Service. He is always here. Come rain, snow, hail, sleet, I knew that Al would be here. He was always in a use or lose situation with his credible time. He was always willing to donate his credible time if a memo would come out asking people to donate time to help someone else. This is probably the last nice thing I'm going to say, Al. He could be an adaptive phys ed instructor. Nah, probably not. Well, one of the stories about Al is, on one occasion, we were having a problem with a guy in Cottage 4. He was asked to go to Cottage 4 to help out. He was instructed not to get hit, but keep his distance. Al went to Cottage 4, tried to calm the gentleman down, and it didn't work. And so Al, taking the advice he was given, moved away from the individual, but the individual followed him. So he moved a little further away, and the individual followed him. So since that didn't work, he started moving faster. And if you know Cottage 4, you can go from the kitchen to the hallway, to the office, to the living room, back into the hallway, into the kitchen. Somewhat of a vicious circle. By the time the psychologist got to Cottage 4, Al was in a full trot going from the kitchen to the office, and then psych took over. He could be a handyman, a jack of all trades. Many times when he was carrying the page, he would get calls transferred to him. Some calls were for a doctor, but if the doctor was not answering the page, he would get the call. One story, not totally verified, was that he received a call that a female staff person had broken her water. Allegedly, he said, "Get her up on the picnic table, I'll be right there." He could be a crisis responder. On one occasion, he received a call that Get to the Farm as one of his favorite guys was having an issue. When he arrived, there was a resident and a pig having a physical disagreement. Al got there, and like the trooper he was, went right into the middle of the melee. He turned back to the psychologist and said, "Who do I pip first?" That is probably why he was in the middle of the melee and not on the side with the other people. He could be a comedian. I'm sure everybody thinks of this gentleman as a true gentleman, but he was a comedian. When Al would enter the office in the morning, he had a habit of adjusting the chair that he sits in. He would bring it all the way down. Al, not being a man of tall stature, when you bring the chair all the way down, he's like the cartoon character that always looking over a fence. People would walk in and all you would see is Al's nose just above the desk. At other times, if someone called him and said, "How are you?" he would say, "Wait a minute." He would stand up, pat himself all over to make sure he was okay. Then he would get back on the phone and say, "I'm okay." He could be a cowboy. As the story goes, Al and a friend of his were walking a horse. When Al turned to his friend and said, "Have you ever ridden a horse?" Does this sound familiar? He threw you under the bus real fast. His friend indicated that he had never ridden a horse. Al jumped on a nearby picnic table, had the horse brought to the picnic table, and jumped on the bareback horse and said, "I'll show you how to ride a horse." Grabbed the horse's mane and took off. After about 30 feet, the horse stopped. Al went another 20 or 30 feet. He got up, walked back to the table, as if nothing had happened. He could be a dignified gentleman. He once went to Lemuel Shattuck to assist one of the guys. Now at the Shattuck at that time were many individuals who were in jail, who had fallen upon hard times. While waiting for the resident's appointment, Al spilled his cup of coffee right into his lap. It was at this point that he had to get up and assist the resident to his appointment. He walked down the hall as if nothing had happened, but his only concern was that he might be mistaken as an inmate. He could be a flasher. I'm not saying he is. He could be. The Renton police received a call that there was a man walking the park horse naked except for a belt. When the police arrived, they could not find the man, but the description was very similar to Al's. His only defense was, "Do I look like I walked?" And the police left. And the final two stories. Luckily, you retired so that you're not officially aboard anymore, so this story, Nick really can't do anything to you. Well, hopefully he wouldn't anyways. Al could have been a short order cook. Al was in his office cooking a couple of hot dogs in the oven. All of a sudden he heard a loud racket and ran out of the office to check on what had happened. When he returned to his office, in his haste to check what was going on, he had left his keys on the desk, but had remembered to shut the door. He was mad at himself, but then he could smell something and realized that he was still cooking the hot dogs. Now panic came into play. As sure as anything, that fire alarm was going to go off. He had to figure out what to do. Finally it came to him. I'll break the door window. It's a little 6-inch by 2 feet window. I'll open the door and save my hot dogs. He decides after he does it, he will put cardboard over so nobody will see anything. Very good plan, it sounded like. He completes his task, and as he turns around, here is a very high-functioning but mischievous resident watching everything Al has done. Al approaches the individual and convinces him not to say anything, as they are panics. Al is feeling good. He goes on his days off. He returns to work after his days off and is immediately called into Joe Paslow's office. Another buddy has slowed you down. He walks into Joe's office, and here's that high-functioning resident sitting right there, and Al was asked what happened to the window. This is my favorite story, and I was actually involved with Al in this one. It's a little off color, but then again, you didn't think I was going to talk the whole time without being a little off color. And I'll probably be in Cindy's office for being a little sexist at some point. Ellen received a concern one day that one of our female staff, who has since been terminated, was inappropriately dressed. Ellen sent Al and myself to check on this. Now, did that sound like a good decision? Al and I went to Quinn to check on the staff. She was in the process of taking material out of a box on the floor. She was bent over. I asked Al what he thought, and he basically talked gibberish to me. His glasses were all steamed up. I then asked him if he saw anything offensive. He said no, I agreed, and we left. Ellen never asked us to go check on staff's appropriate personal care. a serious note, Al, although I've only worked with you for the past 4 years, I have enjoyed our time. We have shared many laughs and dealt with many issues. Enjoy your retirement, you have earned it. I believe Cindy will speak now.
Well, nobody would recognize Rentham if there wasn't a